We're looking at the hierarchy structure that's going on here in law, what's transpiring. When we look into the international covenants, both of them, we find out that there's two operations of law that are going on. There's one that is concerning our fundamental law, natural law, common law, and we can keep on going with different designations, ground law, and so forth. And then on the other side, within the covenants, we see prescriptive law. We see them having the power to limit rights and freedoms, but only in that democratic society, only in that incorporated individual. Now, the Constitution Act of Canada of 1982, it claims, or it states within it in Article 52, that the Constitution Act is the supreme law of Canada. So it is the hierarchy, it is a top law, or the top structure within Canada, the Constitution Act of Canada. However, there's something over this Constitution Act, and that is the international covenants. So the international covenants are supreme law when compared to the Constitution Act of Canada. Now, Canada had the obligation to whatever rights and freedoms were in operation for natural law, or whatever privileges, benefits, if you want to call them that, or rights were available for the incorporated person, that they would find their expression in the Constitution Act of Canada. And that's the obligation that the international covenants produced upon Canada, produced upon the Constitution Act. So when we look at it in that way, the supreme law of the Constitution Act of Canada is the principles, the operations of law that come out of the international covenants. That is the supreme law. Because these laws here, they govern the Constitution Act of Canada. And the state party was under obligation, according to Article 3 in these covenants, to express these rights and these rights in here. And they did. Looking into the Constitution Act of Canada, more specifically 1982. Now we look at the designation, the roles, or the players that are present within this Constitution Act. And we find that there is a designation of everyone. Everyone. We know that everyone can break down into the human being, the man or the woman, or into that incorporated person. Now we can further break this down, that the human being is the one who has natural law, fundamental rights. He has the ability to claim this and operate through this. But the incorporated person only has prescribed rights. Prescribed rights. So when we see in the Constitution Act of 1982, there's several operations of law that can be going on when they use the word everyone. It can open up it to mean the human being or the incorporated person. We go on. We find the designation of individual. We know that individual can mean the same thing. Either one, human being, man or woman, or an individual can be designated that incorporated person, the incorporated being. An individual, as a human being, has natural rights, ground law, fundamental rights and freedoms that can never be limited. The incorporated person, the individual, incorporated person, has limited rights, prescribed rights. Now, again, in the Constitution Act, we find the designation of citizen. Citizen. And it only brings forth the incorporated person. When you use the word citizen, you're not referring to someone who's a human being. Because if you understand what a citizen is, it's someone who is a subject, a servant of a sovereign, who has pledged allegiance, who has been forced to pledge allegiance. But here in Canada, it's considered an incorporated person, and it has limited rights. So in the Constitution Act, when you're looking and searching for your fundamental rights and freedoms that come forth through natural law, foundational law, ground law, common law, you need to look for the designation that opens up or that includes human being. So you wouldn't go looking for, let's say, example, fundamental rights and freedoms for the citizen. By now, after watching a few of my videos, hopefully, you understand that the citizen is a subject and a servant. So it would be just natural not to go look for human rights and freedoms and something that's been rendered a subject. But if you're unaware, now you know that when you're looking for human rights and fundamental freedoms, you need to look under the designation that opens up or that includes the human being. And sometimes they're tricky. I'm not going to get into this right now, but I've made a video about it. Like if you look into the criminal code, the expressions and the words that they use to define the word person, they use a word that leaves the list open, but then they don't mention that a human being can be included in there. We're staying in the Constitution Act of Canada, 1982, Article 7. We look at the starting of the verse, starting of the article of law, and it states everyone. That's the designation that they use, everyone. Now we know that everyone breaks down into the human being or into the legal person. How come they didn't just use the expression here, every citizen? Well, look at what the article of law is describing. It says everyone has the right. Now a right, remember, is something you must exercise. Just because you have a right doesn't necessarily mean you are operating that right. A right is something you must exercise. Now everyone has the right to life, liberty, and security of the person. Can you imagine if they use the designation citizen here? Every citizen has the right of life and liberty and security of the person. It would contradict itself, because we know that that citizen, the Canadian citizen, is a subject or a servant. It doesn't have liberty. We know that the Canadian citizen is an incorporated being, an incorporated person, and it doesn't have life. So that's why the lawmakers knew all about this, and when they came here, they didn't use the word citizen, they used the word everyone. Plus, this expression of this verse here, Article 7, is an expression of natural law and foundational law. And it talks about life, liberty, and security of our person. Security of our person is that, if you will say, right to enjoy a living and not pursue after a living. So they had the obligation to make sure that the human being was included, because we know in the international covenants, the human being has all these guarantees. And if Canada wouldn't have used the word everyone and gave the human being the right to exercise his right to life, liberty, and security of the person, they would be in dishonor concerning the international covenants and the obligations that they have. So everyone has the right to life, liberty, and security of the person as a human being or legal person. It opens up. Now, and the right not to be deprived of these rights except through prescribed law, principles of justice, as they claim. Well, we know that that legal person is the one that has prescribed law applied to it. And these rights to life, liberty, and security of the person are limited. In fact, if you understand what's transpiring, they're actually removed. They're removed from the legal person. No more does the legal person possess the natural basis, or if you will say the foundational basis of these rights. They do have sort of a limited right, but it's not even based in or come out of natural law. It's just based on enactments and regulations. So it doesn't even represent this anymore. It's been prescribed by law. Now the human being that can never be prescribed still has this right in operation for him, still has these rights in operation for him, and can claim it. And that's why when we look here, they're using the term everyone and not the term Canadian citizen. Because if they use the term Canadian citizen, then it would exclude the human being from having these rights, and Canada was under obligation through the international covenants to protect our natural rights, to secure our natural rights. That's why they're coming out here. Now it's important to be aware of this verse starting everyone, and it's dealing with the security of the person. It deals with life and liberty, so that's another great thing to include. But more importantly, the past couple of days I've been speaking about the security of the person and our right to earn a living, and here it's coming out. Everyone has the right, you must exercise it, to the security of your person. So there is a way in law for that human being to access or to use that right to get to the security of the person. There isn't really a way. There is, but it's limited, and I'm not going to explain it in this video or in another video because it's not even worth it. But there is a way for that legal person also to get a right to the security of the person. But the right that it gets, it's so limited and so controlled, and the fight you have to go through to acquire that right, it's not even worth the energy. When we stand under our designation as that human being and call on the obligations through the international covenants and through this article of law that says I have a right as that human being to access the security of my person, and this is what I'm coming to do right now. And I know that through the enactments subsequent to this Constitution Act, you've provided the way for me to operate this right. The Constitution Act of Canada, 1982, continuing on, we're looking at Article number 2. And again, it starts off with everyone. Everyone. Everyone has the following fundamental freedoms. And then it states that everyone has the freedom of association. Now we know that everyone breaks down into the human being, or into that legal person. And once again, everyone as a human being has the freedom of association. The right is protected and it's preserved right here. Why? Because the international covenant, both international covenants, afford us this right. It's a natural, fundamental right that's been brought forth. And therefore, since it is supreme, since it has power over the Constitution Act, the Constitution Act had to include this operation of law. And it did, by using everyone and giving it the right to freedom of association. However, they changed the designation of that human being into the legal person, and through that designation they then limit or prescribe this right, or they try to. We know, first of all, that the Canadian citizen, the legal person, is held in association and is incorporated into the municipality, and it's not given a choice. So right there, it is prescribed. The everyone having the freedom of association has been removed upon the legal person. No more does it have the right to freedom of association. It's an incorporated being, entity, into the local municipality where it lives. But everyone, as the human being, the right is protected and preserved. We can, through our claims, call on this operation of law and say we don't have to be associated with our municipalities, with Her Majesty, or with anybody else. Because, as an individual, one human being, natural law, fundamental law, ground law, has taught us over the generations that no one can force me to associate with anybody. Unless you take a gun, stick it to my head and threaten to kill me, then of course I'm going to say, sure, I'll associate with you, which is sometimes what they do here in Canada, which is even more illegal. So if they do that to you, I guess it produces even a greater claim in a court of law against them. But nevertheless, our right is preserved, and no one should be putting a gun to our head or a gun to our back and trying to force us into subjection, trying to force us into association with an incorporated municipality or another incorporated government body. Because by doing so, you are breaking laws that were here way before the enactments that you are trying to enforce. You see, before Canada came a country, back in the 1800s, a lot of these natural rights and fundamental rights and freedoms that were already in operation within mankind. And mankind understood that, we shouldn't be limiting these rights. And we shouldn't be placing limitations upon these rights. But again, few who claim the right of kings desire and decided that, no, we're going to subject these fundamental natural rights to prescriptive law by designating these individuals legal persons, and will limit their rights and freedoms, all to the profit of the few.